Over these last days, it's been repeated several times that we have to become divine scientists, divine physicists, and divine alchemists. To become a divine scientist, we know that we have had to examine and explore the three levels of life. The level of cause and effect, action and reaction. The level of dreams, intuitions, epiphanies. And we've had to learn the ways of interrelatedness. And as we've journeyed along our spiritual path to become divine physicists, we have had to experience and feel so intensely the changing emotions in our physical being. But what is divine alchemy? Let's see what happens when we bring together an old Buddhist story and an old Sufi story. The Buddhist story is that story of the man who was seeking enlightenment, and as a goal on his path, he longed to have an encounter with the great Buddha of compassion. So he decided that he would go to the mountains to meditate. Meditate on this God. After 12 years, he still had not had even a breath, a whiff, a sight of this great saint and God. So his heart failed, and he decided to go down the mountain. But when he got to the bottom of the mountain, there was a man digging a large hill. And the seeker asked the man, "What are you doing?" And the man said, "This hill is blocking the sun from my house, so I'm removing it." The seeker thought to himself, "It's not possible in many lifetimes that this man is going to remove this hill, and after only a short 12 years, I've given up in failure." So he turned around and went back up the mountain again to ponder and meditate on the great God of compassion. But another 12 years passed, and still not a glimpse had he had. So he descended again, crestfallen, feeling that he'd failed. But then, on the way along the road, he saw another man rubbing a piece of steel with a cloth. And he asked him, "What are you doing?" And the man said, "Well, I'm a tailor, and I'm making a needle out of this piece of steel." Well, of course, the seeker thought to himself, he'll not, in decades and years and lifetimes, succeed, and I have given up so easily. So he went up the mountain again and sat for another 12 years, and still failure. So again he descended. As he was walking down the road, there on the side of the road was a mangy dog, its rear covered in maggots from the sores and open wounds, but still barking at all who passed by. And as he saw this creature, a great wave of compassion rose up in him, washed over him. But he was a seeker of the God of compassion, so the greatest tenet of that was non-hurting. So to save the dog, he would have to kill the maggots, and this was against all that he had learned. So he decided that the only way he could save the dog from its misery and release him was to remove the maggots with his tongue. He knelt down on the sandy road, and blocking out with his senses the smell and the abhorrent sight before him, he closed his eyes and bent down to remove with his tongue the maggots which caused the dog agony. But as his tongue got closer to the ground, he felt that instead of it reaching the body of the maggots, it touched the sandy ground. And with that, a great effulgent light appeared before his closed eyes. And when he opened his eyes, there, standing before him, was the great God of compassion. He was overcome with joy and wonder. And this great God said to him, "I am your real self. And because of this great act of compassion, you have burned the last traces of your karma, which enable you to now see me. But if you doubt my reality, put me on your shoulder and take me into town." So this is what the seeker did. He placed the effulgent God on his shoulder and walked into town. But when he confronted the people there, asking them, "What have you got on my shoulder?" they treated him like a madman. They shunned him, except one old woman whose karma had been burned to a degree. She looked at him and said, "Why, you've got the carcass of a dead dog on your shoulder." This is the Buddhist story. And the Sufi story is of that man called Adam Malik. Now Adam Malik was a merchant, a very, very wealthy merchant. And he was known as the compassionate and kind man of Khorasan, the place in which he lived. He gave alms wherever they were needed. He gave a great portion of his wealth to the needy. But one day he realized that the pleasure and joy that he received from the giving far outweighed the giving. So he decided that what he must do was to give up all his wealth, everything, his belongings, all that he owned. And so he did. He gave up everything. But then, not long after, when he was sitting in his daily meditations, sitting in that place where there was the great void that is left when all has been given away, purged. As he sat, out of the floor in front of him arose a spectre, dressed in the garb of a dervish, wearing a patchwork robe. And this apparition said to Adam Malik, "I am your real self, and because of your great act of divesting all, I am able to appear before you." But then the apparition gave Adam Malik a stick, a rod, and said to him, "Strike me with this rod. When you do, I will change into the wealth of gold, which will never diminish. Have no fear that each time you strike me with this rod and the gold appears, that it will come from that great source which can only be discovered and called upon when all is gone." So Adam Malik did this day after day, giving away the gold that appeared at his feet. But one day a friend came to visit, and after the meditations, when he witnessed this act, he immediately had confirmation that these dervishes had special power, and if you hit any of them, gold would appear. So his friend went off and arranged a great festival feast and invited all the dervishes in town. And when they were there, he took a stick and he beat them all terribly, so that some of them were bloodied and wounded, lying on the floor, until finally some of the dervishes stopped him, held him back, and called the gendarmerie. So, of course, the man was taken off before the courts, and the dervishes came as witnesses to what had happened, and the friend told the magistrate what he had witnessed, that he believed that if he beat the dervishes, gold would appear. But of course, this wasn't enough, so they had to call Adam Malik himself. So, as Adam Malik was walking down the road, his real self spoke to him and told him what to say. So when he stood before the magistrate and related that he did know this man, but the way he had perceived the occurrences at his house was quite different to the actual reality. So the poor man was hauled off to the insane asylum until he calmed down. But from that time on, as he had already done, Abdul Malik continued to beat the dervish that appeared daily, take the gold which appeared, and distribute it amongst all in need. What is this divine alchemy? Knowing well as we do now, what it is to be a divine scientist, a divine physicist. What does it mean to be a divine alchemist? What do these two stories bring up for you relative to the need to know what a divine alchemist is and claim it for ourselves? What is the meaning of these two stories for you?
The first story, the man tried to reach in the spirit, the image of the God through meditation, but it's actually through compassion that brought him to it. In the second story, the man had to destroy his image of a spirit so that the gold of the spirit could flow through him to other people.
Freda.